History often celebrates the kings on their thrones, but the real architects of power in medieval Europe worked from the shadows. This is the hidden world of secret guilds and societies, organizations so powerful they shaped economies, toppled kingdoms, and guarded knowledge too dangerous for the public eye. By the end of this, you will understand how whispers in a hidden chamber could hold more sway than a royal decree. We will uncover why an order of warrior monks vanished overnight with a legendary treasure, and how the blueprint for a cathedral might contain a heretical code. What forgotten truth about power are we still missing today? That public world of craftsmen and merchants was only half the story. To understand the true power of these hidden networks, we must first draw a clear line between the ordinary and the extraordinary, between the guilds everyone knew and the ones no one was supposed to mention. In any medieval town square, you would find the Hall of the Merchant Guild. This was a powerful public institution. Its members controlled trade, set prices, and ensured quality. They were the economic backbone, visible and respected. Then there were the craft guilds, like the stonemasons or the goldsmiths. They trained apprentices, guarded their techniques, and built the physical world around them. These organizations were essential, but they were not secret. Their rules were written down. Their meetings were announced. Their existence was sanctioned by town charters and often blessed by the church. The secret guilds existed in a different realm entirely. Think of them not as businesses, but as conspiracies. Their membership was not a matter of public record, but of whispered invitation. Their meetings were not held in guild halls, but in cellars, forest clearings, or the back rooms of inns after dark. What bound them together was not just a shared trade, but a shared oath, a vow of silence that carried terrifying consequences if broken. Their agendas were hidden, operating in the gray spaces between the law of the king and the doctrine of the church. Some formed to protect a lucrative trade secret so valuable that revealing it could mean ruin. A recipe for a revolutionary glass stain, a method for forging a stronger type of steel, a navigational chart for a treacherous sea route. These were treasures worth killing for and worth forming a silent brotherhood to defend. Others, however, were driven by something far more dangerous than profit. They sought knowledge, not the approved knowledge found in monastery libraries, but the forbidden kind. This could be ancient pagan wisdom, heretical religious ideas, or advanced mathematical and astronomical concepts that challenged the established view of the universe. To pursue such knowledge was to risk being branded a heretic or a sorcerer. So, these seekers had to go underground. They communicated in code, used symbols instead of names, and passed their discoveries only to those they trusted with their lives. This is the crucial distinction. The public guild protected a craft. The secret guild protected a truth or a power that the world was not ready to accept. And it is in the shadow of these hidden brotherhoods that our deepest mysteries begin. Their public mission was one of holy protection, but their private operations built an empire. The Order of the Temple of Solomon, the Knights Templar, began with a simple, noble vow. In the year 1119, 9 knights pledged to protect Christian pilgrims traveling to Jerusalem. They wore their distinctive white mantles with a red cross and took vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. Yet within a single lifetime, this small band of warrior monks transformed into something unprecedented. They became the first truly multinational corporation in European history, a fusion of military might, spiritual authority, and financial genius that operated in plain sight, yet whose inner workings remained a closely guarded mystery. Their network of commanderies and preceptories, which were essentially fortified monasteries and economic hubs, stretched from the Holy Land across Europe to England. A pilgrim could deposit funds at a Templar house in Paris, receive a coded letter of credit, and then retrieve his money in Jerusalem. This system was revolutionary. It eliminated the need to carry vulnerable chests of gold across bandit-infested roads. In doing so, The Templars invented a prototype of the modern banking system, complete with secure transfers, loans to kings, and even a form of armored transport for valuables. Their wealth grew staggering. They managed the finances of crusades, served as treasurers for monarchs, and amassed vast land holdings and fleets of ships. But here lies the central paradox that would ultimately doom them. Their immense power was built on a foundation of absolute internal secrecy. The details of their financial transactions, the rituals of their private chapter meetings, even the full extent of their wealth, were known only to initiated brothers. To the outside world, this secrecy, combined with their visible power, began to breed a deep and toxic suspicion. What vows were they truly taking behind closed doors? To whom did their ultimate loyalty belong? The Pope in Rome, or their own Grand Master? Their success made them indispensable, but their mystery made them terrifying. They were a state within a state, a bank answerable only to itself, and in the eyes of a deeply indebted king that made them not just powerful, but profoundly dangerous. That toxic suspicion finally crystallized into a single, devastating day. Friday, October 13th, 1307, began like any other for the Knights Templar across France. But by sunrise, royal officers were hammering on their doors. King Philip IV, known as Philip the Fair, had issued secret orders weeks in advance. In a perfectly coordinated dawn raid, hundreds of Templars, from lowly sergeants to high-ranking officials, were seized. They were arrested not for battlefield failures, but for shocking crimes concocted in the king's own chambers: heresy, idolatry, spitting on the cross, and engaging in obscene secret rituals. The charges were outlandish, but the motive was brutally simple: money. King Philip was bankrupt, crippled by debt, and the Templars were his largest creditors. Seizing their legendary wealth offered a way to erase his financial obligations and fill his own empty coffers in one swift, ruthless move. The subsequent legal process was a travesty. Templars were imprisoned in damp dungeons and systematically tortured with methods like the rack and the strappado, where a man was suspended by his wrists, tied behind his back. Under this unbearable agony, countless brothers confessed to the absurd charges. They admitted to denying Christ and worshipping a mysterious idol called Baphomet, confessions they would later recant when given even a moment's respite, branding themselves as relapsed heretics in the eyes of the Church. The order was officially dissolved by the Pope under immense political pressure in 1312. But the final act of this tragedy came 2 years later. On a small island in the river Seine in Paris, the last Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, and his senior commander were brought to the stake. As the flames rose, de Molay is said to have uttered a curse, summoning both King Philip and Pope Clement V to meet him before God within a year. Whether through coincidence or the power of a dying man's defiance, both the king and the pope were dead within that year, cementing the Templar legend in an aura of supernatural vengeance. Their vast properties were officially transferred to another order, but rumors immediately swirled that their immense portable treasure, their fabled wealth of gold and relics, had vanished overnight. This single event created the blueprint for every secret society conspiracy to follow. A powerful group brought down by a greedy monarch, its inner truths obscured by torture and propaganda, and its legacy surviving not in open history, but in whispers of hidden gold and unbroken oath. The smoke over the Seine had barely cleared when a second, quieter disappearance sent whispers through the ports of Europe. According to persistent legend, in the tense days before the mass arrests, a small fleet of Templar galleys slipped out of their key Atlantic port at La Rochelle. These ships, the stories say, were laden not with ordinary cargo, but with the true wealth of the order, the contents of their central treasury in Paris. They vanished into the autumn mists of the Atlantic, never to be seen again by royal authorities. This single event birthed one of history's greatest treasure hunts. But what exactly was on those ships? The obvious answer is gold and silver, the accumulated capital of Europe's first great bank. Yet the more tantalizing theories suggest the treasure was something far stranger, something that could not be allowed to fall into the king's hands. Perhaps it was sacred relics of unimaginable power, items the Templars were rumored to have discovered during their decades in Jerusalem. The Holy Grail itself, the cup of the Last Supper, or the fabled Ark of the Covenant. These were not mere valuables, they were objects of divine lineage, tokens of a spiritual authority that could rival any pope or king. Their possession would explain the Order's meteoric rise and the ferocity of its suppression. If such relics existed, hiding them became a sacred duty. This leads to the next layer of the mystery. Where did the fleet go? One enduring theory points north, to Scotland. King Robert the Bruce was under excommunication at the time, making his realm a safe haven from the Pope's decree. Stories tell of Templar knights fighting alongside Bruce at the Battle of Bannockburn in 1314, their sudden appearance turning the tide. Did they pay for sanctuary with their gold, or with their swords? Another, more radical idea suggests the fleet sailed west, following sea charts far older than any known to European navigators. Could a fragment of the Brotherhood have reached the shores of the New World centuries before Columbus, depositing their secret and its guardians in a new land? The treasure, if it was more than bullion, was a seed. Its disappearance did not end the Templar legacy, it merely forced it deeper underground. The sudden infusion of mysterious wealth into certain noble families or nascent guilds could explain the rapid rise of other enigmatic groups in the following centuries. Did the hidden treasure fund the networks of alchemists and esoteric scholars that would later flourish? The Lost Fleet transformed the Templars from a historical order into a perpetual question, a ghost in the machinery of history whose rumored wealth was not just coins in a chest, but a catalytic idea that refused to die. While the Templars' story is one of fire and gold, another secret guild was built from stone and geometry. The legacy of the medieval stonemasons is literally carved into the skyline of Europe, in the soaring cathedrals that still dominate cityscapes today. These were not just buildings, they were acts of faith so ambitious they took generations to complete. And the men who built them, the operative stonemasons, formed guilds that were the direct, historical ancestors of the Freemasons we know today. Their secrecy was not born from fear of persecution, but from the immense practical value of their knowledge. Imagine the challenge of constructing a Gothic cathedral with its ribbed vaults and flying buttresses that seemed to defy gravity. The master mason who designed it held in his mind and in his carefully guarded notebooks a kind of magic, advanced mathematics, structural engineering, and complex geometry. This knowledge was the secrets of the craft, and it was more valuable than any trade secret. To share it carelessly would be to empower a rival, or worse, allow an unskilled worker to make a fatal error that could bring tons of stone crashing down. So the guilds developed a closed system of protection. Entry was through a strict apprenticeship that could last 7 years or more. A young man would learn not just how to shape stone, but the sacred principles of proportion and design, often explained through allegory and symbol. Upon proving his skill, he would undergo an initiation ceremony. This was a solemn ritual where he took binding oaths of fidelity to his fellow masons and swore never to reveal the guild's secrets. These oaths were enforced by a powerful culture of mutual reliance. On a dangerous worksite, your life literally depended on the competence and trustworthiness of the man on the scaffold next to you. But how could a master mason, overseeing a project that might employ hundreds of men from different regions, verify a stranger's skill? This is where the most practical layer of secrecy emerged: the secret signs, words, and grips. A traveling mason arriving at a new cathedral site could demonstrate his membership and level of expertise through a discreet handshake or a whispered phrase. This was the medieval equivalent of a union card and a professional certification, rolled into one. It ensured that only qualified men worked on the project, protecting both the structural integrity of the building and the wage standards of the craft. This culture created something profound, a brotherhood that transcended the borders of kingdoms and even languages, united by a shared craft and a shared vow of silence. By the end of the medieval period, as great cathedral construction waned, these operative lodges began to accept honorary members, men of learning and influence, who were intrigued by the Masons' symbolic traditions and their model of a secret, fraternal society. These men were speculative Masons, who saw the tools of the trade, the square and compass, not as literal instruments, but as metaphors for building a moral life. The operative Masons' practical secrecy had, brick by symbolic brick, laid the foundation for the world's most famous secret society. But what happens to a powerful brotherhood when its original purpose fades? The great age of cathedral building began to slow, the demand for master stonemasons waned, and the old operative lodges faced a quiet crisis of relevance. Yet, rather than vanish, they underwent a remarkable transformation. They began opening their doors to a new kind of member, men who had never lifted a chisel in their lives. These were the speculative Masons, gentlemen, scholars, merchants, and even minor nobles. They were drawn not by the physical craft, but by the lodge's unique culture of secrecy, its structured rituals, and most importantly, its rich symbolism. Inside the lodge, these educated men saw something profound in the stonemason's simple tools. The rough ashlar, an uncut stone, became a metaphor for the unimproved human soul. The mallet and chisel were the tools of self-discipline and education, used to shape that rough stone into a perfect cube, a symbol of an upright, moral individual. The most iconic symbols, the square and compass, took on layered meanings. The square represented morality, acting with fairness and integrity toward others. The compass represented self-restraint, the ability to draw boundaries around one's own passions and desires. Together, they outlined the blueprint for a virtuous life. Even the mason's humble leather apron, designed to protect his clothes from stone dust, was reinterpreted as a badge of honor, a symbol of honest labor and purity of intention. The lodge itself was no longer just a meeting place for builders. It was a symbolic representation of King Solomon's temple. The members were not constructing a physical cathedral of stone, but a spiritual temple within themselves and within their society, built on the foundations of brotherly love, relief for those in distress, and a pursuit of truth. This philosophical shift was monumental. The lodges became rare spaces where men of different social ranks could meet as equals, bound by shared allegory rather than birthright. They provided a structured environment for philosophical debate and mutual improvement, free from the rigid doctrines of church and state. This fertile ground, cultivated in the twilight of the medieval world, was perfectly positioned for the coming storm of new ideas. When the Enlightenment dawned with its emphasis on reason, individual liberty, and questioning traditional authority, the speculative Masonic Lodge was already there. It was a ready-made network, a pre-existing secret society with a philosophical framework that valued knowledge, fraternity, and the gradual perfection of humanity. The medieval stonemasons, by guarding the literal secrets of their craft, had accidentally built the perfect vessel to carry some of the most revolutionary ideas of the modern age. Yet the most captivating treasure was never a chest of gold, but a single sacred object. The Holy Grail began as a mystical thread in medieval romance, but it was woven so tightly into tales of secret knighthood that it became impossible to separate from real-world mysteries. In the late 12th century, the French poet Chrétien de Troyes introduced the Grail to a wide audience. In his unfinished story, Perceval, it is a dazzling platter that carries a single communion wafer, a mysterious vessel at the heart of a wounded kingdom. This was a powerful spiritual symbol, but it was another writer who transformed it into the cornerstone of a conspiracy. Around the year 1200, the German knight and poet Wolfram von Eschenbach took Chrétien's tale and reshaped it into something entirely new. In his epic Parzival, the Grail is not a cup or a dish. Wolfram describes it explicitly as a stone. He calls it the lapsit exilis, a Latin-like phrase scholars have long debated, suggesting it could mean stone from the heavens or stone of exile. This was a radical departure. A stone is not a relic of the Last Supper. It is something older, perhaps a fragment of divine knowledge or cosmic power. And who guards this celestial stone? Wolfram gives them a name, the Templisten. These are an order of chaste, dedicated knights who live in a remote, hidden castle called Munsalvaeske, and their sole duty is the protection of the Grail. The name is no accident. To a medieval audience, Templisten would have instantly evoked the Knights Templar, the Ordo Pauperum Commilitonum Christi Templique Salomonici. Wolfram was writing at the very height of Templar power and prestige. By weaving them into his Grail romance, he performed a breathtaking act of literary alchemy. He fused the popular, fictional ideal of the questing knight with the very real, very secretive military order that fascinated Europe. He suggested that the Templars, or an order like them, might be the guardians of a truth far older and stranger than Christianity itself. A truth embodied not in a golden chalice, but in a stone from the stars. This was not history, but it was something more potent, myth. And myth has a power that cold facts often lack. When the real Templars were destroyed a century later, their legend did not fade. It simply merged with the Grail quest Wolfram had already imagined. The lost treasure of the Order was no longer just gold, it was the Grail. Their secret rites were no longer just banking procedures, they were initiations into hidden wisdom. The fleeing galleys from La Rochelle were not just carrying bullion, they were transporting the sacred stone to a new, undiscovered sanctuary. Wolfram's fiction provided the perfect symbolic container for all the unanswerable questions left by history. It created a template where every secret society that followed, from the Rosicrucians to modern speculative groups, could see itself as part of an ancient, unbroken lineage of guardians. The Grail ceased to be a mere artifact and became a living idea, a metaphor for ultimate truth, perpetually sought and perpetually guarded by a hidden few. In this way, a medieval poet did not just write a story, he built the most enduring mystery of them all. Wolfram's poetic fusion of knights and grails set a powerful template, one so compelling that centuries later it would inspire an elaborate deception. In the 1960s, a series of mysterious documents appeared in the French National Library in Paris. They were called the Dossiers Secrets, or secret dossiers, and they contained a bombshell claim. They purported to reveal the existence of a secret society far older than the Templars, called the Priory of Sion. According to these papers, this order was founded in the year 1099, just after the First Crusade captured Jerusalem. Its stated public purpose was the protection of pilgrims, but its true, hidden mission was staggering. The priory, the dossiers claimed, was the guardian of a profound secret, the survival of a sacred bloodline descended from Jesus Christ and Mary Magdalene. This lineage, they alleged, had intermarried with European royalty, and the priory's grand masters throughout history included figures like Leonardo da Vinci, Isaac Newton, and Victor Hugo, all secretly steering history to protect this truth. The impact of these documents was immense. They wove together threads from Grail romances, Templar legends, and historical speculation into a single, tantalizing narrative. The idea was intoxicating, a hidden hand guiding history, a truth so explosive it had to be guarded by a silent brotherhood across a millennium. It suggested that the real treasure wasn't gold or a cup, but genetic and spiritual lineage, a living secret carried in the veins of history's most brilliant minds. For a time, the myth took root, fueled by best-selling books and later, popular fiction that presented it as fact. The Priory of Sion was portrayed as the ultimate secret guild, the puppet master behind the Templars, and the true keeper of the Grail mystery. However, in the late 20th century, researchers and journalists meticulously unraveled the story. The dossier secrets were not discovered ancient manuscripts, they were clever forgeries. They had been planted in the library by a small group of French surrealists and mystifiers, led by a man named Pierre Plantard. Plantard, it turned out, had a history of creating elaborate fraternal societies and had even been convicted of fraud. The entire edifice, from the foundation date to the list of Grand Masters, was an elaborate hoax, a work of artistic myth-making designed to create a grand historical legacy for Plantard himself. The Priory of Sion, as presented in the dossiers, was a modern fiction, yet calling it merely a hoax misses its profound significance. The fact that this modern invention could be so widely believed and could feel so perfectly congruent with older legends tells us something crucial about the enduring power of the medieval secret guild archetype. The public was primed to accept it because the template already existed in our collective imagination. The hidden order, the sacred charge, the guardians of a truth too dangerous for the world. Plantard's genius was not in history, but in understanding narrative. He tapped directly into the deep-seated human desire for a hidden pattern, for a story where history's great leaps are not accidents, but the work of the enlightened few working in the shadows. The Priory myth proved that the allure of the medieval secret society is not dependent on historical fact. It thrives on possibility, on the gaps in the record, on the haunting question of what might have been whispered behind closed doors. It shows that we are still, in a very real sense, living in the long shadow of those medieval mysteries, forever looking for the keepers of the hidden key. But the shadow of heresy could also hide a treasure of a different kind. In the sun-drenched hills of southern France, a spiritual war raged for 20 bloody years. The Albigensian Crusade, beginning in 1209, was not a campaign to reclaim a distant Holy Land, but a brutal domestic purge. Its target was the Cathars, a Christian sect the Church declared heretical. The Cathars believed in a radical dualism, that the physical world was the creation of an evil force, and only the spiritual realm was pure. To them, the Catholic Church, with its wealth and earthly power, was a corrupt institution of the material devil. This made them not just theological opponents, but an existential threat to the Church's very authority in the Languedoc region. The crusade was merciless. Whole towns were put to the sword, with the chilling command from the papal legate to kill them all, for God would know his own. The conflict culminated at the mountaintop fortress of Montségur, the last major Cathar stronghold. For nearly 10 months, royal forces besieged the castle, where hundreds of Cathar faithful and their spiritual leaders, the perfecti, had taken refuge. Finally, in March of 1244, the defenders surrendered under terms. They were given a 15-day truce. Then, on the morning of March 16th, over 200 men and women who refused to renounce their faith were led down the mountain and burned alive in a great pyre at the base of the rock. It was a final, horrific end to their visible resistance. Yet, the story does not end with the flames. During that strange 2-week truce between surrender and execution, something mysterious is said to have occurred. Under the cover of darkness, according to persistent local legend, a small group of Cathar perfecti used their knowledge of the mountain's secret passages to smuggle a treasure out of the doomed fortress. But what was this treasure? It could have been the community's material wealth, gold and silver coins donated by sympathetic nobles, hidden to keep it from funding the crusade against them. But a more tantalizing theory suggests it was something far more precious to their faith: their sacred texts. Cathar theology was passed down through secret, handwritten books containing gospels and rituals deemed heretical by Rome. The survival of even one of these volumes would have been a sacred duty. And then there is the wildest legend of all, that the treasure of Montségur was the Holy Grail itself, that the Cathars were its guardians, and that in their final hours they passed this ultimate relic into the safekeeping of a hidden network of believers. Whether it was gold, parchment, or a sacred cup, the idea took root that the treasure was hidden in the labyrinth of caves and dense forests of the surrounding Sabarthes region. For centuries, treasure hunters have scoured the area, and local folklore speaks of a secret brotherhood, the Société du Montségur, descendants of those who escaped, who know the location and guard it still. This legend completes a powerful trinity of medieval mystery, alongside the Templars and the Masons. Here was a persecuted spiritual guild, wiped from the earth, leaving behind only whispers of a hidden truth buried in the land itself. Their treasure, whatever it was, became a symbol not of financial power, but of unbroken faith in the stubborn survival of ideas that the world tried and failed to erase. A century after the flames of Montségur cooled, another secret brotherhood was born from ink and paper. In the early 1600s, 2 anonymous pamphlets appeared in Germany and spread like wildfire across Europe. They announced the existence of a previously unknown order, the Fraternity of the Rosy Cross. Their author claimed to speak for a society of enlightened adepts, invisible yet present in every land, possessing the secret wisdom of nature and the universe. The public reaction was a frenzy of curiosity. Who were these Rosicrucians? Where did they meet? And most importantly, how could one join them? The problem was, no one could find them. They existed only in the text, a ghostly guild that seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once. The manifestos told a founding story set firmly in the medieval past. They spoke of a German nobleman named Christian Rosenkreuz, whose name literally means Rosy Cross. According to the tale, he was born in the late 14th century. As a young man, he embarked on a pilgrimage to the east, not to Jerusalem, but to the mystical centers of Damascus, and Fez. There, he did not study conventional theology, but immersed himself in the hidden sciences, in the secret wisdom of Arabian sages and the ancient mystery schools. He learned the deepest truths of alchemy, not as a recipe for turning lead into gold, but as a spiritual process for purifying the human soul. He mastered the language of symbols and the hidden geometry of creation. After years of study, he returned to Europe with a mission to found a secret society that would guard this universal wisdom and prepare for a coming reformation of the entire world. He gathered a small circle of trusted initiates, and together they established the Order of the Rosy Cross. Their headquarters was described as a hidden sanctuary called the House of the Holy Spirit, an invisible college of the mind. When Christian Rosenkreuz died at the advanced age of 106, the story goes, his body was placed in a secret, 7-sided vault, decorated with symbolic diagrams and illuminated by an inner artificial sun. This vault was lost, only to be rediscovered by his followers 120 years later, perfectly preserved, a timeless capsule of hidden knowledge. This was a powerful, foundational myth. By claiming a medieval origin, the Rosicrucian manifestos tapped directly into the aura of the Templars and the mystery of the alchemists. It suggested their wisdom was not new, but rediscovered, a lost stream of ancient truth that had been flowing underground through the Dark Ages, preserved by hidden guilds. Their stated ideals were a revolutionary fusion. They sought a spiritual transformation of the individual through alchemical meditation and symbolic study. They advocated for a reformation of science, one that would reunite the pursuit of physical knowledge with spiritual understanding, seeing the natural world as a book written in God's own symbols. And they dreamed of a reformation of society itself, guided by these enlightened, invisible brothers. They never asked for membership applications. They said they would make themselves known to worthy seekers when the time was right. This was the ultimate evolution of the secret guild idea, a society that was entirely conceptual, living in the realm of influence and idea, claiming the medieval past not for its bloodlines or its treasure, but for its lost wisdom, waiting to be awakened. While the Rosicrucians existed in the realm of ideas, another secret society dealt in the brutal, physical reality of crime and punishment. In the dark forests of medieval Westphalia, a different kind of order held court. This was the Veimgericht, or the Holy Weimar, a secret tribunal that emerged in the 14th century as a terrifying answer to a lawless land. Imperial authority was weak, and local nobles often acted as petty tyrants, with bandits and outlaws roaming freely. In this vacuum of justice, the Veimgericht formed. Its members, called Freischöfen or free judges, were sworn to absolute secrecy. Their initiation oath was a matter of life and death, binding them to the tribunal's rulings and forbidding them from ever revealing its inner workings, even to their own families. To break this oath meant facing the Weim's own swift and fatal justice. This was not a guild of craftsmen or philosophers, but a shadow judiciary. The courts, known as Heimliche Akt or secret proceedings, were convened in hidden locations, often in remote forest clearings, inside caves, or in secluded meadows, almost always under the cover of night. The accused, if they were summoned at all, might receive only a cryptic warning, a knife and a piece of rope left on their doorstep, symbols of the fate that awaited them. There were no public defenses, no appeals to a higher authority. The free judges served as both jury and executioners. Their verdicts were carried out with chilling efficiency. The most common sentence was death by hanging, and the bodies of the condemned were left dangling from a tree as a grim public warning, a silent testament to the reach of this invisible court. From one perspective, the Veimgericht was a secret guild of justice. For common people suffering under corrupt local lords or predatory criminals, it offered a form of rough, impartial retribution where the empire's law could not reach. It claimed to operate under the direct authority of the Holy Roman Emperor, positioning itself as the hidden arm of imperial power, cleaning up the realm's darkest corners. But from another, more fearful perspective, it was pure vigilante terror. Its secrecy made it ripe for abuse. Personal vendettas could be settled under the guise of justice. A rival could be denounced in secret and found hanging from an oak tree days later, with no one to question the evidence or the process. The very mystery that gave it power also made it a tool for intimidation and unchecked violence. The Holy Weim finally faded in the 16th century, as central governments grew stronger and public courts became more reliable. Yet its legacy is a stark reminder that the impulse to form secret guilds was not always about preserving treasure or wisdom. Sometimes it was about filling a void with the most primal form of power, the power to judge, to condemn, and to erase a life under the silent witness of the moon. While the Veimgericht ruled by fear in the forests, another kind of power was being forged in the ports and counting houses of the north. The Hanseatic League presents a fascinating paradox, a vast commercial network that was, on its surface, a public alliance of merchant guilds and free cities. Yet its true strength lay in the shadows, in the secret deals and silent pressures that built an economic empire stretching from London to the distant Russian city of Novgorod. This was not a single guild, but a league of them, a confederation bound by mutual profit and a shared, unspoken understanding of how to wield power without drawing a sword. At its heart were the Kontore, fortified trading posts established in foreign cities. These were not just warehouses, but sovereign enclaves. The Steel Yard in London or the Peterhof in Novgorod operated like independent city-states, governed by Hanseatic law, guarded by Hanseatic mercenaries, and closed to local authorities. Inside those walls, business was conducted in whispers. The League mastered the art of the covert trade agreement, using secret pacts to secure monopolies on vital goods like Baltic timber, Norwegian fish, and Russian furs. They maintained a sophisticated network of informants, essentially early corporate spies, who reported on political shifts, rival merchants' cargoes, and commodity prices. This intelligence was their lifeblood, allowing them to manipulate markets and stay 10 steps ahead of any competition. Their most potent weapon, however, was economic blackmail. If a king or a city tried to impose unfavorable tariffs or restrict their privileges, the League's response was swift and devastating, a trade embargo known as a Verhanstung. They would simply cease all commerce with the offending realm. For a city dependent on Hanseatic grain, salt, or silver, this was an existential threat that could trigger famine and economic collapse within months. It was a form of silent warfare, and it forced monarchs to negotiate with merchant aldermen as if they were fellow sovereigns. The League's meetings, the Hansetage, were held. Behind closed doors, their decisions communicated through coded letters carried by trusted couriers. This culture of secrecy was a practical necessity. In a world of shifting political loyalties, their unity and their leverage depended on presenting a single, unbreakable front to the outside world, while keeping their internal debates and strategic calculations hidden. They were a ghost in the machine of medieval commerce, a state within a state whose armies were ships, whose laws were contracts, and whose battles were won not on battlefields, but in locked chambers where the true price of power was calculated in silver and secrecy. High above the Rhine, the twin spires of Cologne Cathedral pierced the sky, a stone prayer frozen in mid-ascent. For centuries, its construction was the greatest architectural puzzle in Christendom, a project so ambitious it stalled for over 300 years. And at the heart of its origin lies the shadowy figure of Master Gerhard, the first architect, whose story is wrapped in a legend so potent it reveals the deepest fears surrounding these master builders. According to the tale, Gerhard struggled for years, unable to design a structure of such impossible scale and beauty. In his desperation, he finally turned to the ultimate source of forbidden knowledge. He made a pact with the devil. In exchange for the perfect architectural plans, Gerhard promised his soul. The devil agreed on one condition: the cathedral must have no windows. Light, after all, was the symbol of God, and a windowless church would be a monument to darkness. Gerhard, cunning as he was desperate, agreed. He studied the devil's flawless blueprints and began construction. But as the walls rose, he devised a trick. He ordered the workers to place crosses at every point where a window would eventually go. When the devil came to claim his due, Gerhard pointed to the countless crosses embedded in the stone. He argued that a building marked so thoroughly with the symbol of Christ could never truly be without God's light. Enraged but bound by the letter of their agreement, the devil vanished, leaving Gerhard with the plans and his soul, but not without a final curse. The architect, the legend says, later fell from the high scaffolding to his death, a victim of the devil's lingering wrath. This Faustian myth is far more than a spooky folktale. It is a symbolic confession of the awe and terror these master builders inspired. Their ability to make stone saws seemed, to the medieval mind, almost supernatural. How could mere men calculate such heights, such delicate balance, without access to knowledge beyond ordinary human understanding? The story answers that question by saying they did not use ordinary knowledge. It suggests that the guild's secrets were so profound, so powerful, that they could only have come from a transgressive source. This myth protected the guild's status by shrouding it in supernatural danger, while also explaining the very real, tangible secrets they actually did possess. The first was the secret of the mortar. A Gothic cathedral is a balancing act of colossal forces. The wrong mortar mix could crumble under pressure, dooming the entire structure. Guilds like the one in Cologne guarded their mortar recipes as closely as alchemists guarded their formulas. The exact blend of lime, sand, water, and sometimes mysterious additives like egg whites, animal blood, or even volcanic ash was a closely held secret passed from master to apprentice. A batch mixed to the wrong consistency could mean the difference between a spire that stood for a millennium and a collapse that killed hundreds. The second, even greater secret, was sacred geometry. The cathedral's design was not arbitrary. It was a mathematical expression of divine harmony. The ratios used to determine the height of the nave, the width of the transept, the curve of an arch, were based on geometric principles believed to reflect the very mind of God. These principles, often related to the golden ratio or Pythagorean harmonics, were the true devil's blueprint from the legend. To know them was to understand the hidden order of the universe itself. This knowledge was dangerous not because it was evil, but because it was power. In an age where the church was the primary authority on spiritual truth, a lay guild possessing such profound cosmological understanding through mathematics was a subtle threat. It meant that divine truth could be found not only in scripture, but in a compass and a straight edge, tools held by craftsmen, not priests. The legend of Gerhard's Pact, then, is a cultural container for all this anxiety. It acknowledges the builder's miraculous skill, questions its origin, and ultimately frames it within a Christian moral drama where cunning and faith defeat the dark source of that knowledge. The real secret guild of the master builders was not in league with the devil, but they were keepers of a light so brilliant, so potent in its application, that to the medieval world it might as well have been infernal fire. The master builder's sacred geometry hinted at a universe written in symbols, and for another hidden brotherhood, those symbols held the key to transforming reality itself. Alchemy, in the popular imagination, is the futile quest to turn lead into gold. But for the medieval adept, this was merely the surface allegory, a physical metaphor for a far more profound spiritual ambition. The true goal was the transmutation of the self, the purification of the base human soul into a perfected, enlightened state of being. This pursuit was so dangerous, so heretical in its implications, that its practitioners could not operate in the open. They formed the most elusive secret guilds of all, invisible colleges of the mind connected by coded manuscripts and sworn oaths. To share their discoveries, they could not publish straightforward textbooks. Instead, they communicated through lavishly illustrated, deliberately obscure scrolls and texts where every image was a riddle and every process was described in allegory. One of the most famous is the Ripley Scroll, a long illustrated manuscript named after the 15th century English alchemist George Ripley. To the uninitiated, it looks like a bizarre parade of mythological beasts, kings, dragons, and elaborate chemical apparatus. A pelican piercing its own breast to feed its young with blood might symbolize a crucial stage of distillation and reflux. A green lion devouring the sun could represent the action of a powerful acid on a metal. These were not whimsical decorations, they were a precise visual language designed to conceal profound operations from the church authorities, who viewed alchemy as a forbidden magic bordering on heresy, while revealing them to fellow adepts who knew the key. The network functioned like a secret guild across Europe. A master alchemist, often working in a private laboratory attached to a noble's castle or within a secluded monastery, would take on a single, trusted apprentice. The training was not just about learning to handle furnaces and alembics, it was an initiation into a symbolic worldview. The apprentice learned that the 7 metals corresponded to the 7 known planets, that laboratory processes like calcination and fermentation mirrored stages of spiritual death and rebirth. He swore solemn vows of secrecy, not just to protect lucrative recipes, but to safeguard a spiritual technology considered too potent for the unprepared. These scattered cells of practitioners knew of each other's existence through the circulation of these cryptic manuscripts. A scroll like Ripley's would be copied by hand and passed from one trusted circle to another, from England to Prague to Italy, creating a web of shared knowledge that transcended kingdoms and languages. When an adept deciphered a new layer of meaning or achieved a breakthrough in his work, he would encode his findings into his own symbolic treatise, adding another piece to the evolving hidden puzzle. Their greatest fear was not that someone would steal their gold, but that their sacred art would be profaned, reduced to mere greedy fortune-seeking, or condemned as diabolical. So they built their guild not of stone, but of symbols, and their true treasure was never a lump of metal, but the luminous, elusive philosopher's stone of the awakened self. But what of the women in this world of hidden brotherhoods? While the chronicles speak of knights, masons, and alchemists, a quieter, parallel story was unfolding in the bustling cities of the Low Countries and the Rhineland. Here, a different kind of guild formed, one without secret handshakes or hidden treasure maps, yet its very existence was a quiet revolution. They were the Beguines. Picture a walled courtyard in the heart of a medieval city like Bruges or Cologne. Inside, you would find not a convent under a bishop's rule, but a community of lay women. They were not nuns. They took no permanent vows, and they could leave to marry if they chose. They lived together in beguinages, large complexes that housed their own homes, workshops, gardens, and a chapel. They supported themselves through their own labor, weaving wool, making lace, nursing the sick, and teaching girls. This was a life of piety and communal support, but it operated entirely outside the control of a male abbot or a diocesan priest. And in the medieval world, that kind of independence was inherently suspect. To the established church, the Beguines represented a dangerous loophole. They were devout, but they answered to their own elected leaders, the Grande Dame. They studied scripture and engaged in mystical prayer, but they did so without the filter of a male confessor. This direct personal relationship with the divine, free from clerical mediation, was seen as a threat. Their very model of life, a self-sufficient sisterhood, was a silent critique of the structures that demanded women be either wives under a husband's authority or cloistered nuns under a bishop's. Their secrecy was not one of hidden rituals, but of autonomy. The beguinage walls protected a space where women could pursue spiritual and economic freedom, a secret in plain sight. This independence inevitably drew accusations of heresy. They were often linked, sometimes unfairly, to the Brethren of the Free Spirit, a radical mystical movement that believed the perfected soul could not sin and was beyond church law. While most Beguines were orthodox, the suspicion was enough. Church councils issued decrees to restrict them, demanding they affiliate with established monastic orders. Their informal status made them vulnerable. A woman living a devout life outside approved channels was an anomaly, and anomalies were often branded as threats. Yet they persisted for centuries because they fulfilled a vital need. They provided a respectable, secure community for unmarried women of all classes, from impoverished widows to the daughters of wealthy merchants. In a society with limited options, the beguinage was a sanctuary. It was a secret guild of mutual aid where the shared craft was survival itself, and the guarded treasure was a woman's right to her own labor, her own faith, and her own community. Their story reminds us that the most subversive secrets are sometimes not about hidden knowledge, but about alternative ways of living, quietly built within the walls of the world as it is. The walls of a beguinage offered sanctuary, but the stage could provide something even more potent, a shield for satire. In the winding streets of late medieval Dijon and other French cities, another kind of secret guild took shape, one that wore its secrecy as a public costume, They called themselves the Brotherhood of the Green Wolf. On the surface, they were a confraternity of actors, musicians, and poets dedicated to Saint Luke, the patron saint of artists. They organized the great public festivals, the raucous parades and mystery plays that were the highlight of the civic calendar. But within this sanctioned role, they cultivated a dangerous double life. Their performances were not just entertainment, they were carefully crafted critiques, using allegory and humor to say what could never be spoken plainly in the town square. The green wolf of their name was itself a paradoxical symbol, a creature of nature colored unnaturally, a hint that nothing here was quite as it seemed. Their most famous event was the Fête des Fous, the Feast of Fools. For one chaotic day, social hierarchies were turned upside down in a sanctioned release of tension. A lowly choir boy might be crowned a mock bishop, and donkey brays would echo through the cathedral. The Brotherhood did not invent this tradition, but they mastered its subversive potential. They understood that the license of the festival, the permission to play the fool, created a unique gray area. A scathing verse about a greedy tax collector could be delivered by an actor in a donkey's head, and the noblemen in the audience could laugh uproariously, never quite sure if the joke was also meant for him. Their mystery plays, which dramatized biblical stories, were equally layered. While telling the tale of Noah's Ark, they might populate it with thinly veiled caricatures of local officials as stubborn, foolish animals refusing to see the coming flood. A depiction of King Herod could subtly mirror the tyrannical excesses of a contemporary duke. The clergy were not spared either, with gluttonous, corrupt priests often appearing as comic villains, their sins exposed under the holy pretext of a religious play. This was their true genius and their protection. By operating under the cover of art and traditional festival, they could gather openly. Their rehearsals in a guild hall were not secret meetings, but creative preparations. Their coded messages were not in ciphers, but in costume and verse. To accuse them of sedition was to accuse the entire town of enjoying a holy day, a dangerous move for any authority. The Brotherhood of the Green Wolf reveals that the secret guild could exist not in a hidden cellar, but in the spotlight itself. They guarded no treasure map or alchemical formula, but something just as powerful, the means to question, to mock, and to imagine a world turned right side up, all from within the sanctioned chaos of a world turned temporarily upside down. But the flow of secret knowledge was not a one-way street within Europe. While knights and merchants traveled east, a current of far older, more dangerous ideas was flowing back with them. The Crusaders who marched to the Holy Land encountered a world of intrigue far more sophisticated than their own. And nothing captured their fearful imagination more than a mysterious brotherhood from the mountains of Persia and Syria, known to the West as the Assassins. Their proper name was the Nizari Ismailis, a Shiite Muslim sect that carved out a series of impregnable mountain fortresses. To the Crusaders, however, they were the masters of a terrifying new form of warfare, one fought not with armies, but with targeted political murder. Their operatives, the Fida'is, were the stuff of legend. They were said to be young men indoctrinated into absolute loyalty, sometimes through the use of hashish, hence the name Hashashin, which evolved into assassin. They would infiltrate the courts of rival sultans or crusader commanders, sometimes waiting for months in disguise as servants or scholars, only to strike with a dagger at the perfect moment. Their most famous victim was Conrad of Montferrat, the king of Jerusalem, cut down in the streets of Tyre in 1192. What horrified and fascinated Europeans was not just the act, but the absolute, fearless secrecy of it. These killers operated not for personal gain, but for the strategic goals of their hidden master, the old man of the mountain, as the Crusaders called the Nizari leader. Here was a secret guild with a terrifying efficiency, a brotherhood bound by an oath so powerful its members embraced certain death. The stories the Crusaders brought home fundamentally reshaped the European concept of a covert organization. They provided a real-world blueprint for a group that could alter the course of politics from the shadows, whose power lay not in numbers, but in secrecy, patience, and the willingness to deliver a single, perfect blow. This legend of the assassins became a dark mirror, a cautionary tale that would echo in the fears surrounding every secret society that followed in Europe. Yet the Islamic world gifted Europe with more than just a legend of covert power. It also served as the guardian of a lost treasure of the mind. While Western Europe was emerging from its so-called Dark Ages, the Islamic caliphates had been preserving and expanding upon the classical knowledge of ancient Greece and Rome. Works by Aristotle, Plato, Galen, and Ptolemy, which had been lost to the Latin West, survived in Arabic translation. And in the 12th century, a great project of recovery began, centered in places like the Spanish city of Toledo, recently reconquered by Christian kings. Here, a different kind of secret guild formed, not of killers, but of scholars. In the scriptoriums of Toledo's cathedral or in the libraries of enlightened patrons, teams of translators worked in a quiet, collaborative conspiracy against ignorance. A typical team might include a Jewish scholar fluent in Arabic and Hebrew, a Mozarab Christian who spoke Arabic and Latin, and a European cleric hungry for the new knowledge. Their work was a form of intellectual alchemy, transmuting the wisdom of the ancient world from Arabic into Latin, the language of European learning. This process was often shrouded in a necessary secrecy. The ideas they were translating, particularly those of Greek philosophy and science, could be deeply challenging to Orthodox Christian theology. The concept of a world governed by natural laws or philosophical arguments about the soul that did not come from Scripture were potentially heretical. So, these translation circles operated with a degree of discretion, often under the protection of a sympathetic bishop or archbishop who understood the value of this knowledge even as he recognized its danger. They were a secret guild of the word, passing the flame of classical learning from one civilization to another through the quiet, meticulous work of translation. The fruits of their labor, the recovered texts of Aristotle on logic and ethics, or Ptolemy on astronomy, would eventually ignite the European Renaissance. It was a hidden transfer of power far more lasting than any dagger strike, proving that the most potent secrets are sometimes not hidden in fortresses, but patiently copied onto parchment, waiting to change the world. A chisel mark on a cathedral cornerstone is more than a signature. It is a whisper in stone. Across the silent archives of medieval secrecy, from the grandest cathedral to the most guarded alchemist's scroll, symbols served as the true language of hidden guilds. This visual code allowed them to identify allies, protect forbidden knowledge, and speak across distances and even across time, leaving behind a tantalizing puzzle for anyone who knows how to look. Consider the Mason's mark. High on a finished pillar or hidden on the inner face of a gargoyle's plinth, you might find a simple geometric glyph, a combination of lines, curves, and angles. To the uninitiated, it was just a craftsman's signature, a way for the master builder to track which apprentice had done the work for payment. But within the closed world of the stonemasons' guild, these marks could hold deeper meanings. A particular symbol might denote not just a man, but his level of initiation within the brotherhood or the specific lodge he hailed from. More intriguingly, some theorists suggest that the placement of these marks, when mapped across an entire cathedral, might form a larger, hidden pattern, a coded blueprint within the finished work, perhaps pointing to the location of a sealed vault or encoding a sacred geometric truth known only to the master architect. It was a practical tool that doubled as a secret handshake etched in granite. Then there is the most infamous symbol of them all, the so-called Baphomet of the Templars. Under torture, some brothers confessed to worshipping a mysterious head or idol with this name. Historians now widely believe Baphomet was a corruption of Mahomet, or Muhammad, a convenient fiction forced by the torturers to paint the order as devil worshippers. Yet the legend persists because it fits the pattern. If the Templars did possess a secret relic or practice, it would need a name, a symbol to represent it in their most private rituals. Whether Baphomet was a misheard word, a misunderstood artifact, or a complete fabrication, its power as a symbol is undeniable. It became the ultimate emblem of their alleged heresy, a single word that could condemn an entire order, proving that a symbol could be more dangerous than any sword. Alchemists, however, elevated symbolic language to a high art. Their manuscripts are forests of cryptic imagery. A dragon eating its own tail, the Ouroboros, symbolized the cyclical nature of their work and the unity of all matter. A king and queen in symbolic marriage represented the chemical union of sulfur and mercury, the philosophical parents of the philosopher's stone. These were not mere illustrations. They were precise technical diagrams disguised as fantasy. To share a recipe for a crucial solvent, an alchemist might draw a green lion swallowing the sun. Only another adept, trained in the code, would understand that this meant dissolving gold with aqua regia, a powerful acid. This visual language created a boundary as solid as any Guildhall wall. If you could not read the symbols, you could not access the knowledge. It was a firewall against the unprepared and a shield against the accusation of heresy. For how could a court condemn a man for painting a peculiar picture of a bird in a flask? Finally, even public guilds used heraldic devices, coats of arms filled with symbolic tools and animals. A guild of goldsmiths might feature a lion holding a chalice, symbolizing both strength and their craft. These public symbols, however, often had a private, layered meaning for the members. The specific arrangement of tools, the colors used, even the stance of the animals, could reference an internal legend, a founding master, or a secret charitable mission of the Brotherhood. To the town, it was a proud emblem. To the initiated brother, it was a reminder of his oath and his place in a hidden lineage. These symbols, carved, drawn, and painted, formed a silent network. They were badges of belonging, shields for secrets, and a complex language that turned everyday objects into vessels of profound meaning. They allowed a master mason in Chartres to recognize the work of a brother from Strasbourg, or an alchemist in Prague to understand a breakthrough penned by a stranger in Oxford. Today, these symbols remain, etched in stone and vellum, a permanent invitation. They ask us to look closer, to question the simple explanation, and to wonder what messages the keepers of the medieval world's deepest secrets left behind for those with eyes to see. A stone cathedral is a book, and its pages are open to the sky. The great Gothic masterpieces like Chartres, Notre Dame de Paris, and Strasbourg are far more than houses of worship. For the secretive guilds of masons who built them, these structures were perhaps the ultimate act of preservation, a way to encode forbidden wisdom in a language of light, geometry, and stone that would stand for 1,000 years, long after their own names were forgotten. This was not mere decoration, it was a deliberate, audacious transmission of knowledge across generations, hidden in the one place the Church could not destroy, its own sacred heart. Consider the very floor you walk upon. In Chartres Cathedral, laid into the stone of the nave, is a massive labyrinth. To the devout pilgrim, it represented a symbolic journey to Jerusalem, a path of prayer walked on one's knees. But to a mind trained in older traditions, the labyrinth is a profound pagan symbol, a pattern found in ancient Cretan myths and pre-Christian meditation practices. Its presence here, in the most sacred space of a Christian cathedral, is no accident. It is a whisper from the master mason, a nod to a truth that existed long before the current doctrine, carefully embedded where it could not be removed without tearing the Church itself apart. This is the first layer of the code, the embedding of pagan symbolism. Look up at the stone carvings. The green men, the faces of foliage sprouting from mouths and eyes, symbols of nature's relentless, untamed life force. These are not strictly Christian motifs. They are relics of the old forest religions, seamlessly integrated into the fabric of the new faith by the hands of the builders. Then, look to the light. The alignment of these cathedrals with celestial events reveals a second, staggering layer. Chartres is famously oriented so that, on the summer solstice, a single beam of sunlight strikes a specific metal plate in the floor. The great rose window of Notre Dame acts as a celestial calendar with light patterns marking significant dates in the solar year. This is not just pretty astronomy, it is a declaration. It says the builders understood the cosmos as a precise mathematical creation. Their sacred geometry did not stop with making the building stand. It connected the house of God to the motions of the heavens themselves, suggesting a unity between divine law and natural law. This was a dangerously holistic view, one that could challenge a church insisting on its role as the sole interpreter of God's will. By baking this cosmic clock into the structure, the Masons ensured this idea would teach its silent lesson with every passing season, forever. Finally, we come to the most daring possibility, the encoding of heretical ideas. The sheer volume of symbolic sculpture on a cathedral was its own kind of library, accessible to those who could read it. What if, within the countless biblical scenes and saintly figures, the Masons hid references to teachings condemned by the Church? Could the emphasis on certain apocryphal stories, or the peculiar prominence of John the Evangelist over Peter in some cycles, be a subtle endorsement of Gnostic or Cathar-like ideas that valued inner light over institutional authority? The guilds, with their sworn oaths and protected knowledge, were the perfect vessel to carry such dangerous thoughts. They could place a carving of the goddess Isis nursing Horus in a shadowy corner, easily mistaken for a Madonna and child by the untrained eye, but screaming a different truth to the initiated. The cathedral, sanctioned and funded by the very institution it might secretly critique, became the safest vault imaginable. Its messages were not written on fragile parchment to be burned, but carved in tons of limestone, awaiting a future that might finally understand their language. In this light, every flying buttress is not just an engineering feat, but a bridge across time, built by a secret guild to carry a torch of knowledge through the darkest of ages. This silent language of stone and symbol was a direct challenge to the established order. For both the medieval church and the kings who ruled by divine right, these secret guilds represented a fundamental threat, a rival source of authority that had to be controlled or crushed. Their persecution was not random cruelty, but a calculated response to a clear and present danger. To understand the ferocity of the suppression, we must see the world through the eyes of a pope or a monarch. From the pinnacle of power, a secret brotherhood was not a curiosity, it was a conspiracy. For the Church, the paramount fear was heresy. The Catholic Church presented itself as the sole, unchanging conduit to God, the only legitimate interpreter of Scripture and divine will. A secret guild that cultivated its own spiritual practices, studied texts outside the approved canon, or claimed direct mystical experience was operating on heresy's very doorstep. The Cathars were the most extreme example, and they were exterminated for it. But even the less radical posed a problem. A lay stonemason's lodge that taught sacred geometry suggested one could understand God's design through mathematics, not just priestly sermon. An alchemist seeking the divine spark within matter was pursuing a personal revelation that bypassed the sacraments. This independent spiritual authority, this potential for a direct line to the divine that did not go through Rome, was an existential threat to the Church's monopoly on salvation. It could fracture the universal faith, and so it had to be rooted out. The primary tool was the papal bull, a decree with the full force of ecclesiastical law. The most famous concerning our mysteries is Vox in Excelso, the voice on high, issued by Pope Clement V in 1312. This was the document that officially dissolved the Order of the Knights Templar. It did not declare them guilty, a clever legal fiction, but stated that the Order's reputation was so irreparably damaged that its continued existence would be a scandal to the faith. This allowed the Pope to seize their vast properties and assets under the guise of protecting the Church, while letting King Philip of France handle the bloody business of arrests and executions. It was a master stroke of political and spiritual suppression, using the tools of law to dismantle a powerhouse that had grown too independent. For kings and emperors, the threat was more terrestrial, but just as severe. A monarch's power rested on three pillars: the loyalty of his nobles, the flow of revenue into his treasury, and his exclusive right to dispense justice and raise armies. Secret guilds threatened all three. The Templars were the ultimate case study. They held the loyalty of thousands of men who swore oaths to their Grand Master, not to a king. They controlled staggering wealth that existed outside royal taxation and even loaned money to crowns, making monarchs their debtors. This financial independence was a form of power that could bankroll rebellions or refuse to fund wars. Finally, their network of fortified commanderies and their own internal discipline system represented a private military and judicial system within the kingdom. They were a state within a state, and no sovereign could tolerate that. Royal decrees against guilds, both public and secret, were constant efforts to break this independent power. Kings imposed heavy taxes on guild activities, demanded they purchase expensive royal charters to operate, and forbade them from holding private courts or making rules that conflicted with royal law. The suppression of the Hanseatic League's privileges in England and the Low Countries was a slow-motion version of this, a royal campaign to claw back control of trade and revenue from a merchant guild that had grown too powerful. The Holy Roman Emperor eventually moved against the Vehmgericht for the same reason. Its secret courts undermined his imperial jurisdiction. Every secret handshake was a potential plot, every guarded treasury a rival exchequer, and every sworn oath a possible rebellion in the making. This twin pressure from altar and throne created a world of constant peril for any group operating in the shadows. It forced their secrecy to become deeper, their symbols more cryptic, and their oaths more binding. The persecution did not eliminate them. It simply refined their methods, teaching them to hide their true purposes behind layers of acceptable public face. A stonemason's lodge could build a cathedral for the glory of God, while perhaps encoding older truths in its stones. A group of scholars could meet under the guise of a literary society while discussing philosophy that would see them burned at the stake. The hammer of suppression, in trying to shatter these groups, only succeeded in tempering them into harder, sharper, and more enduring shapes. The cathedral stones held their secrets, but the ideas they sheltered could not be contained forever. The underground streams of knowledge nurtured by medieval secret guilds did not vanish with the age of knights and cathedrals. Instead, they flowed directly into the Renaissance, carrying with them the very seeds that would shatter the medieval worldview. The secret networks of alchemists, heretics, and speculative masons became the incubators for a revolution of the human mind. Consider the alchemical workshop, a place of hidden fires and coded manuscripts. While its public face was the search for gold, its private pursuit was the systematic study of nature. The alchemists' meticulous experiments with distillation, crystallization, and chemical reactions formed the rough, secret foundation of empirical chemistry. When figures like Paracelsus in the 16th century began arguing that medicine should be based on observation and chemical remedies rather than ancient texts, he was channeling the alchemical ethos of direct experimentation, a methodology long practiced behind closed doors. The secret guild had protected a way of thinking, a hands-on interrogation of nature that would become the cornerstone of the scientific revolution. Similarly, the heretical impulses guarded by groups like the Cathars and the Beguines resurfaced in new forms during the Reformation. Their core belief in a personal, unmediated relationship with the divine, free from the rigid hierarchy of an institutional church, was a dangerous idea that had been kept alive in whispers. When Martin Luther nailed his 95 Theses to the church door in 1517, he was giving public, explosive voice to a critique that secret spiritual networks had nurtured for centuries. The demand for religious tolerance, for the right of individual conscience, was first practiced in the hidden conventicles of persecuted believers long before it became a political principle debated in the open. But perhaps the most direct lineage is seen in the transformation of the stonemasons' lodge. By the 17th century, the operative lodges had largely given way to the speculative Freemasons. These new lodges, filled with scientists, philosophers, and progressive nobles, became the safe spaces where the Enlightenment was forged. In a Masonic lodge, a nobleman, a merchant, and a writer could meet as equals, bound by allegory rather than birthright. Here, in rooms adorned with the square and compass, they could debate the radical ideas of John Locke, Isaac Newton, and later Voltaire, free from the censorship of church or state. The Masonic ideals of brotherhood, rational inquiry, and the building of a better society provided the perfect philosophical framework for the age. The American and French revolutions were not Masonic plots, but many of their key architects were Freemasons who had spent years in these secretive forums, discussing natural rights, social contracts, and democratic governance. The lodge provided the rehearsal room for a new political drama. The long-term cultural impact is profound. The medieval secret guild, born from necessity in an age of dogma and tyranny, perfected a model for protecting dangerous ideas. It created a parallel society where knowledge could be tested, philosophies could be refined, and new visions for humanity could be nurtured in safety. When the historical moment was right, these incubated ideas broke into the open with world-changing force. The empirical method, religious liberty, and democratic theory all spent their vulnerable infancy in the hidden chambers of these brotherhoods. Their greatest legacy, then, is not a lost treasure or a cryptic symbol, but the modern world itself, built in no small part from the blueprints they kept safe through the long medieval night. The blueprints of our modern world may have been drawn in secret, but our popular culture is obsessed with coloring them in. Walk into any bookstore or turn on any gaming console, and you will find the medieval secret guild alive and thriving in the imagination. From the breathless pages of Dan Brown's The Da Vinci Code to the sprawling digital landscapes of the Assassin's Creed franchise, the same core story is told again and again. An ancient, all-powerful brotherhood, born in the shadows of the medieval world, is still pulling the strings of history today, guarding a truth so explosive it could shatter civilization. This is more than just entertainment. It is a reflection of a deep and persistent cultural hunger. Why does this specific medieval template of knights and masons and hidden relics hold such power over us now? The answer lies in the kind of story it allows us to tell. These modern myths offer a narrative of hidden history. They propose that the world we see with its established institutions and official textbooks is a facade. Behind it lies a truer, more exciting story, one of constant clandestine war between rival secret societies like the Templars and the Assassins, fighting over humanity's spiritual destiny. This framework is incredibly satisfying. It transforms the random chaos of historical events into a purposeful, secret drama. It suggests that every cathedral, every famous painting, every major war might be a move in a game played by hidden masters. This idea resonates powerfully in a contemporary climate saturated with conspiracy theories and a profound distrust of official narratives. When institutions from governments to banks to media are viewed with skepticism, the idea that real power has always lain elsewhere, with a medieval guild that never truly died, feels paradoxically comforting. It provides a single, elegant explanation for a complex and often frightening world. Furthermore, these stories democratize mystery. They suggest that the ultimate truths are not locked away in academic journals or inaccessible to the average person. Instead, they are hidden in plain sight, encoded in art and architecture, waiting for a clever outsider, a modern-day symbologist, or a gifted assassin to decipher them. This turns the viewer or the reader into the hero, empowering them with the thought that they too could see through the veil if they just knew where to look. The medieval setting is crucial because it provides the perfect antiquity. The Middle Ages feel distant enough to be shrouded in legitimate mystery, a time of lost knowledge and forgotten languages, yet close enough to our cultural roots that its secrets feel directly ancestral, like an inheritance we have been denied. So, while historians may dismantle the Priory of Sion as a hoax and clarify the Templars' banking records, the myth endures because it fulfills a need. It assures us that history has a hidden pattern, that great individuals are part of a grander lineage, and that the most important truths are never in the documents, but in the whispers between them. Yet their true power was not in the secrets they kept, but in the questions they force us to ask about our own world. The enduring fascination with these hidden brotherhoods is a mirror held up to our own time. We live in an age of unprecedented transparency, where information flows instantly and institutions are scrutinized under a digital spotlight. Yet paradoxically, this seems to fuel our obsession with historical secrecy. Why? Because the medieval secret guild represents the ultimate counter-narrative to our modern reality. In a world that feels increasingly chaotic and algorithmically determined, the idea of a small, disciplined group of initiates steering events from the shadows offers a strange kind of comfort. It suggests human agency, a deliberate hand, even if it is a hidden one. The Templars did not become a global financial power by accident. They built a system. The Master Masons did not stumble upon sacred geometry. They studied and applied it with intention. Their stories remind us that complexity can be mastered, that knowledge is a form of power, and that small, dedicated groups can indeed change the course of history. This is both an inspiring and an unsettling thought. It challenges the myth of inevitable progress driven by great, lone individuals or impersonal forces. Instead, it points to the quiet, collective work of networks, of people bound by oath and purpose, operating below the radar of official history. Look around at our own society. Where do we see the modern echoes of these medieval guilds? Not in literal secret societies with daggers and hoods, but in the closed algorithms of tech giants, the insider networks of finance, the specialized jargon of experts that excludes the uninitiated. These are our new walls of secrecy, our new forms of guarded knowledge that confer power and breed suspicion in equal measure. The medieval guilds teach us that whenever knowledge is concentrated and access is restricted, a kind of power is born, and with that power comes a story, a legend that grows in the space between what is known and what is hidden. The lost treasure of the Templars is not just a chest of gold. It is the enduring human suspicion that the real levers of the world are pulled behind a curtain. The coded symbols of the alchemists are not just quaint drawings. They are a reminder that every profession, every institution, develops its own language that can include or exclude. So the next time you walk past an ancient cathedral or read a new conspiracy theory about a hidden cabal, pause for a moment. You're not just looking at a building or a wild story. You are witnessing the long shadow of a medieval idea, the haunting possibility that the most important truths are never entirely public, and that the real story is always, somehow, just out of sight. Thank you for joining me on this deep dive into the clandestine corridors of history. What secret guild fascinates you the most? Do you think the Templar treasure is still out there, waiting in a forgotten cave or a sunken ship? Or was their true, world-altering legacy the invisible architecture of our financial system? I would love to hear your own thoughts and theories in the comments below. If you enjoyed unraveling these mysteries together, please hit that like button. It helps this channel continue exploring the hidden past. Subscribing means you will not miss our next adventure into the shadows of history. So be sure to ring the bell for notifications. Until next time, keep questioning the history you think you know, and remember, the greatest stories are often the ones written between the lines.